everybody, and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I had this idea that was kind of inspired by piecing people compare some book recommendations to their favorite songs. So then I was like, what if I compared some book recommendations to just like general pop princesses? So that is what we're going to be doing today. So I have a list of around, I think like 5 or 6 popular pop artists right now that I really like and I listen to a lot that I wanted to give some recommendations for. So if you like this pop princess, read these book recommendations. So I'm very excited about this video. I feel like it's just super fun. It's very like girly pop themed and stuff like that, which is why I'm wearing my pink sweater. So with that being said, let's get into the video. Alright, so the first pop princess that I have here is probably not going to surprise anybody at all, but it is none other than Taylor Swift herself. Of course, Taylor Swift is very hyped, very popular, but can also, because she's so hyped and so popular, not everybody likes her and she's not for everybody. In my eyes, she's just like the ultimate it girl. She has also been making music for a very long time now at this point. In my opinion, she's also lasted throughout time. She's still regularly making music and things like that.
Hello, it is Editing Allie Grace here, and I just wanted to pop in real quick to say that there is quite a bit of static over the next couple of minutes of the video due to my cat playing in the background of the video, which is a little bit annoying. You can either skip forward a little bit if it really bothers you, or otherwise I do fix it eventually. So if you stick around, I really appreciate it.
So the book recommendations that I have are very hyped series, but they're also series that are still ongoing. Neither of these recommendations for the Taylor Swift category I'm going to give synopses of, just because I feel like they're so hyped that it's a little redundant to give those summaries. The first one that I have is ACOTAR, and the second one that I have is Fourth Wing. So these are ongoing romantasy series that are hyped and popular, but also like because they've gotten so hyped and popular, not everybody likes them, and some people in fact like really don't like them at all. And I feel like that's very similar for Taylor Swift. Of course, if you haven't picked those books up, I do personally enjoy those books. So those are the books for that category. Sorry, my cat is being a pain in the butt. I did also want to give one other recommendation for the Taylor Swift category, just because, those two series are just, I don't feel like it's really even possible for people to have not heard of them at all. My other series it's actually completed, so it kind of doesn't fit in that way, but it is a very comfort series for me that I reread all the time just because it feels so comforting to me. Taylor Swift is also like that for me, where I listen to her music just because it's so comforting. That series for that element is the Infernal Devices trilogy by Cassandra Clare. So this has been very hyped in the past. I'd say maybe the 2018 time frame. It was definitely more hyped. And this is in the Shadowhunters world created by Cassandra Clare, of course. Hold on, I gotta put my cat away. Back to the Infernal Devices trilogy. It does take place in the Shadowhunters world, but it takes place back in, I want to say the 1800s, and it follows some of the ancestors of the characters in the Mortal Instrument series, which was the first series in this world. I really enjoy the characters and just the overall Victorian steampunk era type of vibes of this story, and so it is one that I've read 3 or 4 times now at this point. And I overall just really love it. I find it comforting. So it fits well for me for the Taylor Swift category. So kind of along the same vein of the Shadowhunters world, the next pop princess that I have is Britney Spears. And so Britney Spears is, I feel very classic. She's an oldie but a goodie, very much giving the 2000 vibes. And she's also not really actively making music anymore, so a completed series in my mind fits that better. And so for this, I have the Mortal Instrument series because it has that 2000 vibes to it that I feel just really fits well with Britney Spears. I did want to pick another one for this, and so the other one that I picked was Archer's Voice. I don't think it's necessarily set in the 2000s, but for some reason when I was reading this book, all of the depictions of the main character Bree setting up her home at this new lake house setting, and the depictions of going out and things like that just felt very 2000s to me. And another element of this book that I feel like really fits Britney Spears is the trauma that the two main characters have been through. And so Britney Spears, of course, went through her own traumas as well. So I feel like that parallel is also there as well. And so Archer's Voice is just about this main character, Bree, who moves to this small town on a lake to escape some negative experiences that she's had in her past. And there she meets the main character, Archer, who doesn't actually speak because of traumas that he's been through in his past. And so it's really about their story of meeting, falling in love. And I really enjoyed this book. I don't know what it was, but the setting of the small town on the lake just felt very atmospheric to me. It felt very like late spring and summer vibes to me, even though the book, I think, originally started taking place in summer and then kind of went into winter and fall. But it did have that summer feeling to me, and that was a very atmospheric feeling. And so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And I also really enjoyed the characters of Bree and Archer and seeing how they really like handled the things that they've been through. Alright, so the next pop princess that I have here is Gracie Abrams. In my opinion, Gracie comes across as more like soft. Of course, all of these artists do talk about emotional things, but the way that Gracie elicits these feelings is very soft and slow and graceful, and also almost like having a bit of a vintage vibe as well. With that, the first recommendation I have for Gracie Abrams is An Enchantment of Ravens. This book is about a human, I think, artist who paints a portrait of a fae, and when she paints the fae, she paints sorrow into his eyes, which leads to a lot of drama in the fae courts because fae aren't really supposed to have these human emotions. And so he then whisks her away to the fae world, basically trying to show the fae courts that he's like ruthless, things like that. From there, it really follows like their love story. And so I think the whole like element of painting sorrow into someone's eyes is very Gracie Abrams coded because it just has this like soft feeling to it. I think that this book, it has elements of ruthlessness to it just because it does deal with the fae, but it does feel very emotional, and so I feel like that definitely fits Gracie Abrams vibes. And so the second book that I have to recommend for Gracie Abrams is Psyche and Eros by Luna McNamara. I've honestly not seen anybody talk about it on the internet at all, really, but my friend actually gave it to me not this past Christmas, but the Christmas before that, because we do a book swap every Christmas. She said that Psyche reminds her of me, and I will say that like after reading the book, I did very much relate to Psyche, and I saw a lot of myself in her as well. Anyways, Psyche and Eros is a Greek mythology retelling following, of course, Psyche and Eros. Eros, of course, being one of the old gods who really focuses on sensuality and beauty and things like that, where Psyche is a human who, through a series of events, I don't want to like give too much away, but she starts to develop a relationship with Eros. And so this book also felt very soft and slow to me. Like it was very slow paced, but not in a bad way. It felt very raw in like the way that you watched these characters develop, and so I also feel like that's very fitting for Gracie Abrams as well. And so this book was one of my favorite from the last year. If you're in the mood for a Greek retelling and you're not necessarily needing something fast-paced and you can take your time and relax and follow a slower paced story, which I feel like all of the Greek retellings that I've read feel more slow paced than the other books that I typically read. Anyways, we have 4 more people. The next pop princess that I have is none other than Sabrina Carpenter. So I think Sabrina's overall vibes are, you know, a combination of this like cute and girly aesthetic, but also has this very smutty, not anything like too serious kind of vibe to her at the moment. So this makes me think of smutty contemporary romances. And so the one that really comes to mind for me with this is The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. I read this book earlier this year, and it is following this billionaire whose dad just died, and in order to get the money, he has to develop this project that kind of reinvents the wheel at the theme park that their family owns. And it is very reminiscent of certain magical theme parks, if you know what I mean, which I absolutely loved because I also love certain magical theme parks. So that is one main character, and the other main character is an employee there who has tried to get on the creative team before. So it really follows their love story. It's not like overly smutty in my opinion, but it does definitely have some spicy scenes. They do address some aspects of like the emotions around things, but it is more so lighthearted. There were definitely some moments that made me laugh out loud as well. I feel like that whole like theme park setting, especially like with it being the magical theme park, I feel like just really fits Sabrina Carpenter's vibes overall. I don't know why, but like as I was reading this, I just kept picturing like pink and sparkly, which is very Sabrina Carpenter coded. On the other hand, my next pop princess is Olivia Rodrigo. Olivia Rodrigo is definitely on the edgier side of things, and almost, in my opinion, has this air of trying too hard to be edgy, if that makes sense. And I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. It's just almost like a little over the top or overly cheesy in a way. I am also an Olivia Rodrigo fan, so like this is definitely not shade, but it does feel like maybe a little like trying too hard in a way. The trope that comes to mind for me with this is the badass female main character in a lot of romantasy books that are very stabby. They're going to stand up for themselves and take care of things, and they're very witty at the same time. Like that stabbiness and that aspect of wanting to be snarky is just slightly over the top. And so the one that comes to mind for me for this, first off, is Lady of Darkness by Melissa K. Roach. This book follows Scarlet, who is of course, the stabby and snarky female main character. She is like a trained assassin who is finding out that these children in her world are disappearing, and so she really starts working with other people to try to figure out what's going on with these children, and then trying to make sure that everything is okay with them. That's really what the first book covers, and then from there it just completely develops into this whole big saga and big story. Very reminiscent of Throne of Glass, in my opinion, in the way that the story kind of starts with an assassin and then develops into this like big, huge story of worlds and things like that. This series definitely reminds me of Olivia Rodrigo because there is more of that depth to Scarlet specifically, but she also has this edge of like she's been through some shit, and so she really puts on this hard edge that she shows to the world, but it does feel like just slightly over the top at times. So the next pop princess that I have is Chappell Roan. So Chappell Roan, in my opinion, is very flamboyant, very queer-coded, and at times also seems like very 80s inspired. So I do have two recommendations for Chappell Roan because I don't think I've read anything that's like 80s inspired that is also queer coded, if that makes sense. So I have one that's like more on the 80s side of Chappell Roan, and then something that's like more on the queer side of Chappell Roan. So the book recommendation that I have for the 80s vibes that Chappell Roan gives sometimes is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. This really follows a girl whose friend gets possessed by a demon and the process of them trying to exorcise this demon from the friend. So I read this book, I don't know, it was several years ago that I read this book, and I did like it, but I don't think I gave it a super high rating. I want to say it was like maybe like a 3 or 3.5 star rating for me, but I think that's because I went into it with the wrong expectations. So I went into it thinking it was going to be this like fast-paced horror book that's very thrilling, but it wound up being more of a story about friendship and love in friendship with some aspects of horror, and so the focus was more so the friendship than the horror, from what I can remember. But it does very much have 80s vibes. As you can see from the cover, I'm probably putting it on this side if I had to guess, but as you can tell from the cover, it is very like 80s vibes as well, which fits with the 80s vibes of Chappell Roan. So the book that I have that's more on the queer side of things for Chappell Roan is Payback's a Witch by Lana Harper, I think is the author's name. I read this book last year, but I don't necessarily remember a lot about it other than that it had a lesbian couple, I think, or a female-female relationship within the book. It also is one of those books that's like a mixture of a lighthearted fantasy romance that also takes place in like a contemporary romance type setting. Throughout this, I think like to save the town, the main character has to go through these different trials to basically like win the right to be able to have more say in the town and how the town is run and things like that. That's probably not the best synopsis to give, but I do have a fever and my energy is starting to wane, so I am sorry if these summaries are not very good right now. Because it has this female-female relationship, I do feel like that vibe fits Chappell Roan's queer-coded energy. And so we are on the last pop princess now, and that is Tate McRae. Tate McRae definitely has this very sporty vibe to her, but also very like sexual. And so this makes me think of sports romances, especially if they're hockey romances, because Tate McRae's overall outfits and vibes are very hockey inspired. And so I have 2 recommendations for this. I really love the sports romances that I've read so far, but I have not read that many. So the first one that I have is it's a bit controversial because not everybody loves this book, but I did really enjoy it. I really liked the sports aspects to it. One of the characters had some eating disorder pathology, and because that's what I specialize in, I really liked seeing that in a character. And that book is Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This book is a romance between a hockey player and a figure skater. It's definitely smutty, but I do feel like it has like some depth into it, especially with the eating disorder representation there. The next book that I have to recommend in this category is less like sexy smutty and more so like about the drama, but I feel like with some of Tate McRae's music, she does really have this salacious tell-all kind of feeling to it. So the next recommendation that I have is The Favorites by Lane Fargo. So this follows 2 ice dancers who were very popular in this story, but then because of a falling out, I think at the Olympics, they stopped skating, and so then there's like this documentary aspect of like a tell-all, like what really happened all that time ago. And it's really like the first time that the main character has talked about everything since it all went down. I also really enjoyed this book. I thought that it was really fast-paced and easy to follow and just really hard to not think about. Like I haven't really thought about it much since finishing it per se, but while I was reading it, it was like very much taking up a lot of my headspace. The documentary aspects to it too were like just very well done and definitely had that feeling of Daisy Jones and the Six where it made the characters feel so real. I was literally trying to look them up and trying to learn more about them and their lives. Because of that, those were like my favorite parts of the book, and I feel like it does have that salacious tell-all kind of feeling to it that Tate McRae's music also gives me the vibes of. So those are all of my book recommendations for this video. I honestly had a lot of fun like thinking about this video. I have some fun plans for how I'm going to edit it, so hopefully those work out the way that they are in my mind right now. I just had a really good time filming this and brainstorming this, so if you want a part 2 of this, please let me know, and also let me know what pop princesses you would want to see me talk about and give book recommendations for as well. If you've made it to the end of the video and you don't like necessarily have anything specific to comment, you should leave a microphone emoji to symbolize the pop princesses that we talked about today. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!